Have a listen. Have a listen.
I was nothing about 3 years ago. I'm here now, so I think if you're listening, you focus and you just step out your comfort zone a little bit. Who cares if you get embarrassed? You know, anything can be impossible. But a big thanks to my parents, to my mum, my dad, my family, the ones who love me and the ones who I love.
Oh, Uncle Roger.
Lawrence is in the house.
Yeah, it's really, but he had a massive surprise, didn't he?
Yeah, well, he talked about this before. Jake Gyllenhaal, one of his heroes, talked about it a lot. Jake Gyllenhaal, good guy, heard about it, and then quit.
I think everyone knows about Jake Gyllenhaal. I don't know. I think I'll just stare at him. I don't really know. I've got no words. Oh my god. Yeah, I'm
So
good.
nice to meet you.
I'm good.
Anytime I'm for you.
Oh.
Just a lucky duck.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, maybe a little bit of luck.
I just came back.
A lucky duck. I think Jake's also got a lucky duck.
That's so cute. Isn't that lovely? You do wonder if you've got like 20 years' time, that'll happen. You'll be the one going in and giving a lucky duck to a young man. We're going to see great things.
Absolutely. Absolutely brilliant.
Real sight. Incredible majesty. Are we mentioning Evan Cummings?
Absolutely. There he is. He says his
Yes.
US person, but he's absolutely brilliant at. To give a shout out to everyone, including people that dress up as kids at parties as well. Talks about the ultimate
simple, and works really well for a wide variety of things. However, sometimes it is difficult to know what's
I mean, you
happening,
just, you say, so who's coming as presenter?
and get everything
You
working
really don't know what's going to happen.
You have no idea.
I created my simple focusing kit. Inside here, everything you need to start focusing, and nothing is going to go. I want to show you what you get, how to use it. Hopefully, we catch a load of fish today as well.
A few years ago, and I thought I had gotten really close with my fellow nominees.
I definitely recommend you
especially
don't
after I
just go and
won,
get
but
set up in the first spot you
I'm
get
pretty
to.
sure they were losing
Obviously,
from
it's
the group
convenient
chat,
to just
but we were all
put your
supposed to
kit
go
down
on
and
a
start
trip
fishing
to
straight away.
Ibiza.
But
And
a little bit of patience and some observation
I found out
will really help you.
that I wasn't
Try
included.
and
And the
find
only reason I knew
signs
that
of
was
fish. So,
because
for example, there's some bubbles
Elizabeth
coming up
Debicki and
again,
I
and a few
have the same
what looks like
magnetic field.
fish touching
And,
the surface but are ripples.
at least
I
Kurt
also
is
want
working,
to
but
choose a spot where there aren't trees directly overhead, because when I cast my line, I don't want to be stuck in those. And there'll be certain areas of the lake that just hold more fish than others.
Now, you know how sometimes you say, what is point if you say
Where I'm fishing today is a data kit, a course fishery. Basically, data kit means you pay someone, the owner of the land, a small amount of money and they'll let you fish for the day. The other option when you're starting out is to maybe join your local fishing club. This is a once a year payment. You get access to a range of waters that you can fish as much as you like. If you're in England or Wales, you will also need a rod license. This is like a legal requirement from the government website. I'll stick a link to the rod license in the description.
It was so
But for me, float fishing is best done somewhere with a decent stock of fish. So asking your local tackle shop, go online, do a bit of research to try and find a well-stocked mixed course fishery. This place should be perfect for today's fishing. It's got good all crucial tench, green, all sorts of reasons. We might even catch a carp later on a different lake just down the road. But for now, I'm going to choose what spot I'm going to fish. Start getting set up. It makes sense. The first thing we do is run through the kit and look at what you get inside. There's a bait tub, quite a large one. That's what you can keep your tackle inside, or you can mix bait in there too. A leaflet with information as to how to use everything in the kit. Some floats of a range of different sizes. Some ready tied rigs. This is so that you don't have to do any fiddly small knots to attach small hooks. Main line. This is what you will put on your fishing reel. Plummets. These are for finding the depth. A disgorger, in case a fish gets deep hooked, you can slide that down and unhook a fish. Some split shot. This is how you weight your float and also how you add weight to the float so that you can actually cast it. And some scissors. Of course you need those for cutting line. Aside from all of those bits and pieces, there's also a couple of bait related items. There's some ground bait. The reason I've included a kilogram of ground bait in this kit is because ground bait is a perfect way to start your session. You pour maybe a quarter or a fifth of this bag into the bait tub provided, sprinkle on a little bit of water and keep sort of mixing it thoroughly with your hand. Keep adding water until it gets to the consistency where you can ball it up and throw it into the water. This gets to the bottom, creates a little cloud of fishy smells and attraction, and will draw those fish like bream, roach, carp, tench into the area, and they'll start grubbing around looking for food. This stuff is absolutely ideal for drawing fish in but not filling them up too much. Then, because you can't put ground bait on a hook, I've provided a small bait tub. If you go into your local tackle shop with this and you ask them for half a pint of mix, please, half a pint of mixed maggots, they will fill this with like maggots of all different colours, which means you can try a red one if you're fishing for perch or tench, they just seem to like red ones, or a white maggot if you're fishing for bream and roach. Not sure why, but fish have preferences on certain days. I've also brought some sweet corn. Not essential, but it's cheap, it's a great bait, and if you're getting loads of very small fish with maggots, putting a bit of sweet corn on can help you find some bigger ones. Not always, but sometimes. Of course, for any type of angling, you're going to need yourself a rod and reel. This is a dedicated float rod. It's 10 foot in length, nice and light in the hand. And I'd say most float rods that you see on the market will be 12 foot long. And that's fine if you're fishing a larger lake or potentially a deep one. But for beginners or anyone sort of getting into fishing on small to medium ponds like this or canals and stuff, a 10 foot rod is a lot more manageable, a lot cheaper because it's less carbon and just easier to fish with, to be honest. Combined with my float rod is a 3000 size reel. This is the perfect float reel size in my opinion. You can go a bit smaller, down to a 2500 or even a 2000 size, and you could go a little bit bigger, up to maybe a 4000 size fixed spool spinning reel. But for me, all I want is something that's compact and lightweight. If you hold it and it feels really heavy, it's just going to be tiring to use. On the reel, I've already spooled up with 6 pound line, the line that's provided within the kit. This stuff is perfect for all-round fishing, no matter whether you're catching roach, tench, even carp. The way you spool up is before your session, take the line and drop it into a bucket full of water. Then pass it through the butt eye of the rod towards the reel, open up the bail arm, and then tie the line to the spool. Doesn't really matter what knot you use because it's going to be buried underneath all of the line. You're never going to see it again probably. Pinch that line between your finger and your thumb so it's sort of a bit tight, and then reel it all in through your fingers. Also, don't forget, make sure that the spool of line has the label facing upwards as you're putting line onto your reel. This is to ensure that you don't end up with line twist, which can happen if the main line is sort of turned over and the label is facing down within the bucket. I like to fill the spool until it's about 1 millimetre away from the top of the lip. If you put too much on and it's overfilled when you go to make a cast, too much line will spring off and you're more likely to get a tangle. Then once you're all done, obviously you've got the line clip on the reel to store the line, and then you can trim the end and you're ready to go. Aside from the rod and reel, other things that you're going to need on your session are a landing net. This is in case you get a fish that's too big to simply lift out the water. If you get one that's quite large, you can scoop it in the landing net. Look for one of these sort of framed landing nets with a handle that you can screw on to attach. I find these to be most resilient. They last a lot better than the sort of triangular pop-up ones that you sometimes see. They look like a good idea, but they don't tend to last and will often break. I'm sitting on a bucket. You could, of course, bring yourself a chair, like one of the ones you can get from supermarkets or Argos. But this bucket works great for me, and although it's not super comfortable, it's nice because I can also store bits and pieces inside. Then I've also got an unhooking mat. Some fisheries have a rule that says you can't fish their lake unless you've got an unhooking mat. This is for fish care purposes. If you've spooled up your reel and the line is a little bit twisty and you want to correct that, just lay the rod down somewhere where it can't move, let off like 10 meters of line, let's say, and then between your thumb and your forefinger, sort of pinch it and walk backwards along the line. I'm applying pressure to it to remove the twist, and I'm just sort of threading the line through my fingers and I'm pulling on it as it slips through. And to be fair, I quite like doing this when I first put line on a reel, because sometimes it's just a little bit wiry, but once you've given it a good pull to straighten it out and you've threaded it through your fingers just a couple of times like this, then it will be lovely and limp and smooth, ready to cast easily. Let's put the rod together, just line up the eyes so that they are sort of lined up together, because that makes sure that casting is easy. Push it together, like don't be afraid, but equally don't ram it on too hard, because you need to be able to detach it at the end of the session. Then take your reel, locate it in the reel seat underneath the handle, and then tighten this twisty thing. I've got some great technical terminology here on fishing tutorials, until it's locked in place. There you are. Then open your bail arm up before taking the line out of the clip and beginning to thread it through the eyes. Be careful not to miss any, because if you do, or if you accidentally wrap the line around the back of the rod before going through an eye, it will make casting the float quite tricky. Now you can take the float that you want to use and thread it onto your line before locking it in place with a couple of split shot. The float has a rating written on the side of it, which advises the number of split shot you're going to need to pull it all the way down so just the red tip of the float is showing. This one says 3 AAA split shot, so I've just taken 2 for now, and I've put 1 on each side of the float. You can pinch them on with your fingers or your teeth, however, the teeth is probably a safety hazard, so I probably shouldn't recommend that. Instead, using the handle of the scissors is quite good. To sort of apply a bit of tension and pinch those split shot into place. Then at the end of your main line, you'll need to tie a loop knot. You can do an overhand loop knot or a figure of 8 loop knot. Figure of 8 is my favourite. It's a little bit stronger, I think, and a bit more streamlined in the water. The way to tie this knot is just to fold the line back on itself, then create a loop within the folded back section, bring the line behind the loop so it sort of goes round the back before then passing it back through that loop that you created. Moisten the line slightly so that when you pull it down the friction doesn't burn it. Pull it tight and then trim the tag end. If you're struggling at all with any knots, be it the ones for this rig or any other, do check out my channel for a full playlist of simple fishing knot tutorials where I run through each knot a little bit slower and sometimes with thicker lines so it's not easy to see. Once you've created that loop in the end of your line, you the ready tied hook length. A hook length is basically just a short section of line pre-tied to a small hook. These little hooks can be really fiddly to tie, and that's why I've provided them already attached to these hook lengths. The other thing is that the hook length material is thinner and less strong than the main line on your reel. So if I was to get snagged around those lily pads, or if I cast in a tree or something, if I pulled, I shouldn't lose the float. It should only be the hook or this very thin line that actually snaps.
I need to watch that again.
And that's why I've provided them already attached to these hook lengths. The other thing is that the hook length material is thinner and less strong than the main line on your reel. So if I was to get snagged around those lily pads, or if I cast in a tree or something, if I pulled, I shouldn't lose the float. It should only be the hook or this very thin line that actually snaps. Because I've just got a couple of split shot either side of the float, if I cast it into the water, it sits with quite a lot of the float still sticking out.
Cheers.
This is perfect for now, because what we're going to do is find the depth of the water in front of us using a plummet. So I'm now going to take the hook, pass it through the top of the plummet before putting the hook into the rubber underneath. That'll just hold it in place long enough to cast out and work out how deep the water is. The way the plummet works is it's just a bit heavier than what the float can take, so when you cast in, if you're set too shallow, it will pull the float down. And as I can see, my float is completely invisible now. It's disappeared to the bottom of the lake. So what I'll do is reel in and slide the split shot up, moving the float away from the hook. I'll keep doing that and then casting back in again.
Don't even need
Until
to
the
tie
float
it
is
on.
on the surface.
You split shots to
Now,
keep the
I've made
float
it
on
quite
the
a lot
line.
deeper. And if I cast that out,
Don't
I
even
can
have
now
to tie it
clearly see
on.
my float is in the water and sticking right out. This is because I'm now set too deep. So I'll slide the float down towards the hook a little bit, and I'll keep adjusting this little bit at a time until I make a cast and the float sits just right, with just the red bit sticking out. Now I know it seems like a lot of hassle, you know, casting out multiple times, adjusting the depth and getting it set right, but it will really affect your catches, especially if you're targeting fish that prefer to swim around near the bottom of the lake and feed on the deck. Those are species like tench, carp, crucians and bream. They certainly prefer to sort of feed on the bottom. However, if you're targeting golden orph, rudd, maybe roach, or carp if it's quite warm, then maybe you might want to set your float shallower and fish with a bait that's closer to the surface. Because I started off with just a split shot either side of the float and no others, the float naturally wants to sit with quite a lot sticking out of the water. This isn't very sensitive. If a fish pulls on it, the float's not going to move so much, and to spot delicate bites, I prefer to add a few more smaller split shot, maybe number 8s or number 6s, spread evenly down the line. And I keep adding those split shot, these small ones, until the float just sticks out like the orange bit. This makes it very sensitive and easy to spot when a fish has taken the bait. If you want to target larger fish near the bottom, group all of your split shot just above your hook length. Put them in a little sort of patch or a line together. This will pull your bait to the bottom really fast. Or, if you're like me and you want to fish the whole water column with the bait falling a little bit slower, spread those split shot out like this, where I've got 1, 2, 3 number 6s all spread evenly, because this will give you a slower fall of your bait and an opportunity to catch fish as the bait is sinking. Now that is ready to go. All I got to do is put a maggot onto the hook, just nick it through gently, check the drag. You want to be able to pull line from that quite easily. You can of course tighten it up a little bit whilst fighting a fish, but I just tighten it up a little bit. There we go. And I'm ready to cast out. Do so by trapping the line on your finger, opening your bail arm up, bringing the rod carefully over your shoulder and holding it behind you before pushing and letting go when the rod is pretty much like vertical. Then I can put the rod under the surface, do a couple of reels to make the line all sink, because you don't really want your line laying all on the surface out there. And we will see if that float pulls under or bobs or twitches, and if that float basically does anything that's a bit weird, like it starts jiggling around or going under or lifting, then it's probably worth lifting the rod and tightening up to see if there's a fish on the end. The float is in position now, and other than a small amount of maggots scattered around the float every now and then, there's not much else you need to do. Spotting bites is sometimes really easy. The float just bombs under and a fish is on the end, but sometimes it's a bit more sensitive. It's a little sort of gentle bobble on the float tip, and if it just pulls weirdly to the side or starts twitching or sliding away, just strike by lifting the rod quickly, and you should have one on the end. Sometimes you miss bites. You strike too soon, you strike too late, but this time I've hooked this one absolutely perfectly, just in the side of the mouth there. So when you get one like this and it's hooked just in the edge, it's really easy to get the hook out. But if it's a little bit deeper, then what you need to do is take your disgorger. This is a small sort of plastic thing with a slit in the end. If you apply a little bit of tension to your line, maybe by laying the rod on the ground and just moving the fish slowly away from the rod, so that the line is under a little bit of pressure. Slide the disgorger into the fish's mouth, and just with a gentle push and a twist, like a push and a sort of a twist to the side, the hook should come out pretty easy. If it doesn't come out first time, slide down the other way, and pull left. And if it doesn't come out, then pull upwards, slide down and go right. And in some direction or other, the hook should come out. In a worst case scenario, if you really can't get the hook out and it's barbless, then you just cut the line, the fish will get rid of it itself. But of course, if there's someone around, another fisherman, you could just put the fish in the water and go and get some help from them.
Bonjour!
Cast out further than where I'm actually fishing. Rod tip under, reel as fast as I can, and that will just sink the line beneath the surface, meaning that the wind isn't going to pull the float side to side. And then, as you've probably noticed, every cast, or every other cast, every couple of minutes, just a little pinch of maggots. There might only be 4 or 5 maggots at a time, but throwing them out around the float is going to draw more and more fish into the area. Of course, you could go fishing and just have a little tin of corn, and you could put 1 grain on your hook and not throw anything out all day long, and you might catch something. But as you can see, by feeding little and often, drawing more and more fish into the area, we're getting plenty of bites. This one, an adorable little tench. Today I'm getting stacks of bites. Pretty much every time I cast out, the float's going under and I'm catching loads, but other days it's not like this. Sometimes you've got to feed a bit less because you don't want to fill the fish up. And other days you've got to, maybe switch location, try a different spot on the lake, maybe cast closer in or further out. Float fishing for me is about experimentation, trying different things until you work out what's working for you on the day. Today, everything seems to work. I'm getting bites non-stop, but on other days you might need to switch to a different bait, try fishing a bit deeper or a bit shallower, feeding a little bit less, potentially, if it's a slow day. But right now, it's one of those amazing days where you can't go wrong, and every bite produces a fish. Every bite produces a fish. What I meant was every cast produces a fish. I'd say if you're struggling to catch fish, and you're just not really getting very many bites, putting on the smallest hook you've got and using the smallest bait you can, i.e. 1 maggot, is probably the best way to get plenty of action. But if you want to select bigger fish, you want to try and catch something that maybe pulls a bit harder and is a bit bigger, then you might want to change to use a bigger hook and a larger bait. If you're catching loads of tiny little perch and roach and you want to catch something bigger, like a bream or a tench, you can always switch to sweet corn. And by doing that on a little bit bigger hook, you can maybe get less bites, but sometimes slightly bigger ones. Bream. Now, bream are great action, especially on small lakes like this. But as you might have already noticed, they are a little bit slimy. So, the optional extra
you can eat bream, I know that.
When you come fishing is a tea towel or cloth of some description to clean your slimy hands afterwards. Other species like perch, crucian carp, they're not really slimy at all, but bream are definitely the smelly ones.
Look.
I'm actually thinking I might move. Not only is there a lot of willow fluff on the surface here, which is getting caught on my line and making casting and stuff quite tricky, I'd also really like to catch a carp today. And there is another lake down there, so probably have another 1 or 2 casts here, and if this willow fluff doesn't blow away on the wind.
I'll go to the
Time to go elsewhere
play.
and catch a big one. There's basically no...
Well, Larry, that was a beginner's guide to fishing. Float fishing. So now I know how to attach that bobber. Just use split shots. Don't have to tie it on. Don't have to tie any float on.
Do float fishing. Big lake.
Bye.